We are here at the Firehouse Art Center for an artist talk. And our artist talks are just chats with artists, curators, members of the creative community, and creative entrepreneurs with a focus on how to build community within the arts. So Firehouse Artist Talks give the community a chance to come in and ask questions and get to a deeper level with the art on our walls. So we are taping this talk. You can find it on our YouTube channel in a little bit after this. And then along with our past artist talks and presentations, including our talk last month with Clara Nolte on her exhibit Palimpsest that was here. I just wanted to start with a couple of updates for the Firehouse Art Center. We do have live drawing tomorrow, and then the last Sunday of the month, we are having our artist meeting on September 23rd at 6 p.m. at 300 Suns, and I hope to see all the local creatives there. And we are having Katrina Painting Days in September on the 18th, which is tonight, 21st, 23rd, and 24th, with the exhibit hanging first week of October for Dia de los Muertos. We were coming back with our fiesta, the Dia Fiesta, in partnership with City of Longmont and the Longmont Museum, and that is October 8th, with the Katrina Ball scheduled for October 28th at 7 p.m. So really happy to be coming back with that. I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsors really quick. LDDA, Longmont Downtown Development Authority, Longmont Creative District, Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, Longmont Community Foundation of Boulder, Boulder County Arts Alliance, and to Colorado Creative Industries. We couldn't connect our community to creative and life-changing art experiences without their support. So if you would like to donate to support our programming and exhibits, please visit our website, and you can find that at www.firehouseart.org. And lastly, in the spirit of healing, the Firehouse acknowledges and honors the Arapaho tribe, the original people of the land upon which the Firehouse sits. We also wish to acknowledge all other indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. It is because of their hardships and sacrifice that we are able to be here sharing this art with you today. And the Firehouse believes that we can only grow when we have a better appreciation for the history, legacy, and contributions that the tribes have made, not just to this region, but to the nation. So I am so excited to be here today with artist Jono Wright, our summer artist in resident, as well as Melissa Furness and Trine Bumiller, whose works are featured in Risky Business that was curated by Jono. And I just wanted to do an introduction for Jono. Jono Wright is a Colorado painter who creates art that explores ideas about spirituality and the creative process. He believes in discovering the meaning of his work during the creative process rather than illustrating a preconceived idea. Portraying subject matters such as plant life, people, and objects, he intertwines Buddhist philosophy, Western psychology, and ritual theory, fusing traditional genres of landscape, figure, still life, and abstraction into unique contemporary forms. He studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. He's been in Florence studying at the Studio Art Centers International, the New York Studio School, and also MSU Denver, where he earned his BFA, and Louisiana State University, where he earned his MFA. He's had many different residencies, including, obviously, the Firehouse Art Center residency. So just a little bit about our residency before we go into talking with the artists. We host a summer residency and also a winter residency where artists come and work in the South Gallery for 3 months before a culminating solo exhibit in the main gallery, which is Jono's work is hanging in the main gallery right now, with the opportunity to guest curate the accompanying South Gallery show. So Artist Occupied program at the Firehouse Art Center is intended as a professional development opportunity for emerging and experienced visual artists, hopefully bringing them to a new creative level as they connect to the visitors that come into our space. So I guess my first question would be, do you think we accomplished that?
Well, the development, I mean, yeah, in all kinds of ways. I guess for me, a lot of the development happened in terms of the way I approach making paintings. Like it says in my statement, I usually don't plan out the concept or plan out the meaning or even sometimes plan out the subject matter. It's all just kind of a big creative messy soup that gets figured out as I'm making it, you know. But this was very different because I invited the community to bring in the subject matter, right? And so that really freed me up in all these unexpected ways. I didn't have to conceive of the meaning. And in fact, that was conceived when I thought about the project. And the meaning is, it just takes the meaning into a different kind of, it's more broad, I think, and more all-encompassing rather than, you know, the meaning from each particular painting, which is happening too. It's just, I guess, there's just different levels of meaning that are happening, but it freed me up in a lot of ways to not have to sort of figure out each painting in the same way that I normally do. I was able to just enjoy composing them and working with them in the formal dimensions, you know, of color and arrangement and space, and light was a big part of it for this, the use of value and light.
Mm-hmm. So the exhibit is called Memento Vivere, which is kind of a counterpoint to Memento Mori, which is, you know, reminders of death. These are altars that you put together as reminders of life, using things that the communities brought in that would be items that they would grab from their house, right? As something that, you know, they wouldn't be able to leave their house with. So the community members came in and they photographed these items, and then Jono put them together in these living altars. Can you kind of talk about, I know you said that the subject matter, having the subject matter was limiting, but then also freeing.
Yeah. So
how did you take these elements that people brought in and then arrange them?
Yeah. Limiting is such a wonderful way, right? And so freeing, you know, having parameters helps you organize your thoughts and have creative problem solving, you know, a little bit less stress in a way, actually, having the subject matter. And then so the way that I arrange them, I told somebody this at the opening, that I just told myself over and over again, it sounds cheesy, but yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Because like when you're making a painting or any kind of work of art, there's a lot of self-doubt that happens, a lot of questioning, and I didn't have time for that. Like I just could not deliberate. You know, I had to just, if I had the inspiration and the impulse, just do it. Go, 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 go. So some paintings came together a lot easier than others. Challenging one, actually, my friend, the Pets painting here, I can't remember what I'm calling it, the title, but a little tricky, you know, a little tricky to make those dog leashes work and to make the kind of awkward photograph of the dog work. And so the final thing that kind of pulled this painting together was putting the little bird up in the top left, and it really is like a counterbalance to the portrait that's in the foreground, because portraits usually draw the attention so much, and so having this yellow bird really balanced out the way that the way that your eye moves through the painting. I also did some research and visited a couple of antique shops and took photographs of chests and cabinetry and things like that to kind of help my imagination and to help kind of construct the space of the paintings. And then I sometimes collage different cabinets together to come up with something and just use my creative license. And then the beast over here, double meaning to that title because obviously it's of a velociraptor is what it is, of a 10-year-old's toy. But then putting it together, man, was really tricky. It was a beast of a painting to paint.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Actually, we'll get, I have some questions on titling of work,
Okay.
and we'll get that when we start talking about risky business. I like how it has that double meaning.
Yeah.
And I know you just talked about how you had to, like you were saying, just go, just do it. Was that part of like the residency being 3 months that was like, there's always that deadline, a very evident deadline that was coming. Was that part of why you just had to just go for it?
Yeah. That's a big part of it. So, again, one of those things, it's like a blessing and a curse a bit, right? It just makes you focus. It defines the parameters of what you're working with, and then you can be creative inside of those parameters. But yeah, I didn't have much time to mess around or to second guess or to, I just had to make it happen. So.
And you did.
That's
Thank
cool.
you. Awesome.
Yeah.
So part of the residency is people would come in and they would talk to you, and you were very open. You would open the back door. People would just walk in and kind of wander and ask you questions. I know you're a teacher. Do you think that kind of helped you in the process of inviting the community in and kind of making them a part of the creative process? For sure.
Being a teacher is being on stage performing and not in performing. And performance doesn't mean inauthentic either. But you're just up there in the spotlight and you have to vocalize, you have to explain, you have to be organized and all those things. And after a handful of years teaching every single day, you get pretty used to it. And it's just kind of second nature. And I think for me also, partly the reason why I'm a teacher is because I enjoy that kind of thing. It comes naturally to me. I've always found some sort of a comfort in the spotlight. And a different part of my personality comes out, and it's really fun.
And I just kind of wanted to lead this back to your bio and how you were practicing Buddhist. I don't know if it's really the case that most practicing Buddhists are like, I like being in the spotlight. And also, a lot of this project was about holding on to things. And, I'm leaving my house, I need this thing. And a lot of what I know about Buddhist practices is that letting go and not being attached. So how do you these are two, things that seem paradoxical.
Right, yeah, I was wondering if you were going to talk about this. The Dharma or Buddhism is there's a lot of contradictions and a lot of paradox. Because it's really all about challenging your ego and challenging the way that you hang on to things. And so it functions at all these different levels. We can hang on to the concept of letting go, right? Like you can construct your ego around that and just be like, I don't care. I'm letting go. But really that's your own little armor, your own little egoic personality construction. So really, hanging on to objects or letting objects go, we're going to stick our toe in the deep end of philosophy here. Well, in plain language, I suppose you could say that there's absolute truth and there's relative truth. So absolute is like that everything. So speaking Dharma language here right now, Buddhist language, like that everything is free of inherent personality, I guess you could say. Free of, they use the word emptiness. So it's empty of anything solid, right? So nothing is actually solid, and everything is interpenetrating at the deepest fundamental level of creation and existence. And then, so that's the absolute, and then the relative is all of the different myriad manifestations that there are. And so both of these things are true. So take that into the context of our work, of the work right now. Letting go and holding on to things is both like a valid, I think, a valid thing to do. And as human beings, we need structure, we need shelter, we need objects. We've evolved with technology, right? Mm-hmm. So these things that we have are important, and they help us, and we need support, and we need those kinds of structures in our lives. And so these items in particular are hopefully functioning to remind us of what gives us life. And maybe there are little doorways into the emptiness, little moments that give us life-fulfilling vitality.
So yes, I know you said, I was wondering if you were going to ask me that. And it was definitely something that I was thinking about. I was driving and I was like, but wait, what? Mm-hmm. So I definitely had to come back to it. Yeah. Another thing that you had said to me before is that, you do let go while you're creating something. So obviously, you've been here working on these works, and I've seen the progression and the changes. And, I come in one day to the next, and the background's completely different. And then suddenly, there's spray paint. And so how did you do that? What were the decisions that you were making? And was it intuitive? Did you go into it saying I need to change this up, or you just let it open up?
Yeah. Well, my practice up until these paintings, like I've talked about a little bit, is very tumultuous and very much letting go and discovering new things all the time. I mean, I like to, in the talk that I gave at Front Range, it's so helpful to document the process of making a work, because you can see whoa, you're talking about the background totally changed, or you moved the figure way over here, and this is nothing like it started out. So I'm really kind of used to doing that, and used to just being all right, start over, just cut it. And that kind of, I like to call it fearlessness, I think, and it comes through the work, I think, and it leaves the DNA of the work has that fearless quality to it, I would hope, because of the decisions that one makes when they're making the work. It's infused into the DNA of the work. So I'm pretty comfortable doing that. I'm almost less comfortable having structures. So it's a nice balance for me with this body of work, the amount of structure, and then being able to just kind of be in my comfort zone of I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, and the deadline again was helpful in that way. Just had to say, yes I can, yes I can, yes I can, and it was a big catalyst for my growth, I think. Mm-hmm. I mean, doing the spray paint on the back of that one painting, I did a little test. Normally I don't even test things, right? But this time I tested on another board. I was like, all right, I think it's worth it. It needs something. I don't want it to just be blank back there. I need something. Go for it. So I did it.
Yeah. And as we're recording this, we'll reference the paintings that we talked to. So we'll talk about. So we'll have cool. The pictures of those works at the end. So talking about that the residency and the deadline, how has the residency changed your practice, and what do you think is your biggest takeaway?
Well, I'm really excited about what I've learned over the course of doing this, because it's given me a methodology, perhaps, of interacting with the community. And in fact, I think I said this, I don't know, to you, Elaine, earlier, or somebody, with the Longmont meteor, I was talking about this a little bit. About using my artistic skill in service. Such a great place to position myself. I really love that. And I've always felt sort of uncomfortable with being with the model of the artist as a genius in their little studio. And it's kind of there, that model, it's kind of in place, but I really like collaborating. I mean, I'm verbalizing a lot right now. I'm kind of a verbal processor. And so talking with other people and it's just very rich, and I'd like to in a lot of different ways. I got different ideas of how I can evolve and bringing them into my practice.
Awesome. And part of the residency is that you did get a chance to curate the South Gallery, and I wanted to get into that. Is that your first curation show?
Yeah, I think it is actually. Yeah, you asked me that a couple weeks ago or something. Yeah, it is. I'm trying to think. It's kind of muddy waters back in my memory right now, but yeah, I think it's my first time. And I've had this idea for Risky Business for a little while.
Yeah. So in the South Gallery right now, we have the show Risky Business, curated by Jono Wright, and he brought together 5 contemporary artists along on that aren't afraid to push boundaries. So you will see in the exhibit, artworks from a moss-covered wheelchair to a painted refrigerator door, and the artwork included in this exhibit is a result of experimentation and fearless adventuring beyond the known and comfortable. So the quote that you had given me about the exhibit was, "Brains are maximally creative when they trade security for surprise, routine for the unknown, but those mental leaps come with a cost. They are risky." So we talked about, as an artist can, go along in their practice, they start to get predictable, make safe decisions, and then they kind of lose that novelty and vitality. And this exhibition was kind of like your idea to, just embrace that creative risk-taking. And so you reached out to, 5 different artists, and we have Melissa Furness and Trine Bumiller here. Could you talk to us about how you kind of went about choosing these artists?
Yeah. Well, they're kind of my local heroes.
Actually, this is very true because he was, we had discussions and he was nervous and anxious and very excited, and he was texting Trina's in, Melissa's in, exclamation mark. So it was. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've admired their work for a handful of years, as long as I've known of them. Really, I remember seeing Trine, your paintings up at the, it's across from the Performing Arts Center in Denver, years ago when I was, you might not even remember me.
I don't remember.
Right. And then I remember.
Performing Arts Center?
Well, it was, it's one of those.
Concert hall?
Yeah, one of those convention center, right?
Oh no, I have stuff at the convention center permanently. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. And when I was a student at Metro, I saw them, and the colors and the forms I love, and then I saw a solo show of yours at Naropa when I was teaching there for a semester.
Yeah.
Just resonated with the color. And,
this is why you say yes to everything, because people see your work and
you
never know.
There you go. Right.
When it will come back to haunt you.
There you go. And likewise, Melissa, I saw your work when I first started studying at Metro as well, and just automatically respected the integrity of your work and the investigations that you're doing, the forms. It's all beautiful and interesting, So I was, those are, you all were, and also since we're going to talk about the Art Knots a little bit, but since joining the Art Knots, I felt like, I might have one little stepping stone towards asking you all. And
Cool.
And then the other artists that are in here too. Ian is a younger artist that I really admire, and also involved in the Dharma and Buddhism. And Kevin Sloan's been a great friend to me. I admire his work. So artists that I admire,
Mm-hmm. And just to give you a little bit of background, so Melissa Furness is a conceptual painter and installation artist whose work has been most influenced by her experiences of travel, and there are lots of you've had lots of opportunities. So included artist residencies around the world, such as those with Chantal in Wyoming, Yaddo in New York, the Lasnia Center of Contemporary Art in Poland, Shanko Castle in Ireland, Redgate Gallery in Beijing, the Hungarian Multicultural Center outside of Budapest, and Kala Art Institute in Berkeley. So you participated in various international exhibitions and was invited to exhibit work at the 2016 Kochi Muziris Biennial in Kerala, India as well, through the AIR Gallery of New York. So Furness's work has been represented in the past by galleries in New York, Seattle, Palm Springs, and Zurich, leading up to her current representation with the K Contemporary K Contemporary Art in Denver. Through these galleries, she has been featured in numerous group and solo exhibitions, as well as international art fairs in Seoul, Zurich, Cologne, Los Angeles, and Aspen. And also Trine Bumiller explores the relationship between memory and experience through paintings and installations that hover between environment and abstraction. She has a BFA from Rodin School of Design and studied in Rome with a European Honors Program. Her numerous solo exhibitions include the University of Wyoming Art Museum, the Las Cruces Museum of Art, the History Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the Fort Collins Museum of Art. She has also exhibited her work at the University of Colorado Art Museum, Cincinnati Art Museum, and the DMZ Museum in Korea. In past years, she's had exhibitions in Colorado, Italy, the Netherlands, Uganda, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Colombia, and Cambodia. So
these guys.
Yes. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how your work relates, and hopefully, Jono, if I start saying something, I'm gonna give kind of like my take on, and then jump in.
Okay.
but it was really interesting because in talking about Melissa's work, you have the main gallery with these altars of life, and Melissa's work that we actually have in the back kind of function as, artworks of disposability and kind of like decay. So I always found it interesting, like you were focusing on that, and then we walk into the back to a show that you curated, and Melissa's 3 pieces were, what are the four pieces?
Yeah.
What are the meanings behind your work?
I guess you would call them altars of death. I kind of like that. that quality, right? I mean, it's sort of like that. Because I'm playing around with the notion of, like another death of painting, because it's been kind of beaten to death, right? So much because it's been recurring in history, and really the work is about taking and turning that sort of Western canon of art on its head in a certain sense. But thinking about my larger body of work, it's about this idea of ruin, both public and private. And with this body of work, I was focusing on that sort of public history of art and trying to change your perception of its sort of established notions of what's good and what's not good, or what is seen as beautiful or opulent, and changing your perception of it by extracting elements from these well-known paintings, things that I saw that were recurring of the work at the time, that were seen as, this is the ideal thing to put in a painting, and instead taking that thing out from multiple paintings and put them together in a pile. Which then you see them as kind of almost a pile of junk or a pile of trash, in that sense. Sorry, I went off on tangent there.
Fantastic. That totally leads into my next question. So, you were saying how you put these works together in a pile of trash, and looking at the work, it does seem chaotic. There's a big pile of stuff. But how much do you structure that and think about the composition?
Well, I suppose we work opposite in that sense, is that I am conceptual. I think of that idea first, and then I work more creating a sketch or a digital sketch and sort of moving things around, because that composition to me is important, and particularly with these works, because I was borrowing from other artists. My struggle was when I was trying to paint like other artists who I don't paint right? And I was oh, they're really, so it's kind of interesting to kind of try that out and make it happen. But the I suppose thread within my work has always been that sort of quality of the chaotic and the larger pile of stuff, this maximalism and these lines going through, leading your eye through the piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you were talking about decay, and when I was looking at your work, I kept on thinking about the contrasts and the contradictions of things that are disposable and decaying, but there's kind of an element of like hyper realism or scientific precision, which, something's decaying, but it's so together and focused. How do you choose what you put in focus and what you don't? Or
I think it's more like the decay of the idea of the transformation of the history of like me as a teacher, also being sure to be clear with my students that the West didn't invent everything, right? And it's really very wrong and incorrect, and that's something that I always notice on my travels, that I really study museums, and my job, I feel like museums are put out there as kind of like these sort of godly things, and we don't like question, what's this thing in this box and why is it here? And for me, I feel like I'm always doing that, like, why did they put this thing in here for me to look at, and what's making it important? And I find that if you start to ask yourself those questions, you'll find that some of those histories aren't quite right and incorrect, and they'll change, or it's almost like a game of telephone. And I'm interested in that game of telephone with history, and you'll see that recur in my work.
Yeah. Your installation, Splitting Hairs, has 2 paintings that deal with hair, and they're wigs. They're like hair pieces. Is that right?
No, they're not exactly. They're hair that I've taken from, famous portraits, like Renaissance portraits. So they're not really. So I suppose some of them could be wigs, but they're not really. I've just taken the context out.
Mm-hmm. And then and we will show the image in the recording, but it's 2 paintings that are angled within, and you can actually open them, and there's scissors in the middle, and then there's a skull, like a collection of skulls at the bottom. What were you thinking of when you paired all of those together as far as?
That's a new piece. So even though the paintings were created, you reconceive things according to the space and the location and what seems to work best. And so the one set of hair is man hair and woman hair, and the skulls below are like that Memento Vivere kind of pile of skulls. And thinking about these historical divisions of identity and gender, and how things are transforming and changing in current society. A kind of like cutting or slicing of that from the past, I suppose, in a way.
Mm-hmm. So those 2 pieces come together and they hang at angles, and I know that is something that you do with your work. Is that something that you like to play around with, just like the way somebody sees the artwork? You were talking about museums and how everything's presented in that box, in that space. How do you make the decision of how to present your work?
Well, the original body of work I conceived of as, I had been doing this whole line of work that was this idea of painting as ruin. So the body of work prior to that, the ruins were actually pictured in the paintings, and I was kind of letting go of that and making the paintings into the structural ruins themselves. The pieces that I did for the Biennial of the Americas in 2015 were like I made like 315 paintings, but I ended up like actually putting them outside as a ruin on site, as a like massive structure. And this was kind of the second rendition of a different idea of the ruin. And so they were originally based off of the dolmen, which is a stone table. And I'm fascinated with that history of the fact that there are these things that are so old that we try to guess what they were for, but we don't really know, right? And so this questioning of its status in history, and then me also questioning of the importance or the preciousness of painting, and presenting it in a way where it's not just like this picture on a wall that you step back from. And rather the interaction, the bodily interaction, or even like the opening of the piece, things like that.
Very cool. And I know that you had talked about, Jono, the title of your piece, The Beast. Melissa, your titles, so for the meat painting,
Yeah.
we were referring to the meat painting, is your dead meat, and then the whole collection of the hair, splitting hairs, and is it I'm Gonna Wash That Man?
I don't know if I have them memorized, but wash that man out of the hair or something like that.
Yes.
And then the other one is,
Yeah. So, as far as titles, how much of this, is it an integral part of the creation of the artwork, or is it something that comes about more towards the end? And all of you can answer this.
the title comes after, but I chose them specifically because they're idioms, and I wanted to show that quality of the history as a cliche with them.
As far as how do
I title?
Yeah.
It's usually after, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, most all the time it is. Every once in a while something else will happen. Or like maybe halfway through, I'll come up with it. Mine are a lot less complex, which is awesome, but mine are a little more straightforward, and I haven't really landed on a way that is really awesome yet for titling, but they're just usually kind of descriptive, and I guess my attitude towards it is a little descriptive and short, so that there's not so much focus on the title and sort of conceptual figuring of things out so much, and just I want the title to just be very broad and very simple, and then let the person do the investigating on their own and enjoy the sensuality of the work.
And then Trina,
Yes.
I in our conversations, when Jono was talking about risky business and something that is kind of atypical of your work, how did this work come about, and how is it different from what you do? I actually, I kind of see a connection with the work that you do, but it is different. So how's
Well, primarily I'm an oil painter, and I've been doing oil paintings for years, but I was invited to participate in another biennial, maybe it was it was 2013, so maybe it was a couple years, 4 years, in a biennial, the Americas. Courtney Stell was the curator, she's now the director of the Black Cube Museum, and I don't know how we knew each other, but she said that she wanted some artists to create things for this park that was near Red Line called Sustainability Park. And they wanted the artists to address the idea of sustainability and doing something that was maybe made of recycled materials and something that could withstand the elements, that could be outside. And there was an artist down there who had there are several artists that have studios like outside on the ground there. And she had suggested maybe I paint the wall, like one side of the wall of this artist's studio. And I felt kind of funny about that. I thought, well, I don't want to paint his, he's working inside and he's going to have my painting on the outside. So I asked her if I could do something different. And I've always wanted to kind of create a freestanding piece. And I thought, and they had offered me someone to help me make it, and so I don't know how I came up with this idea, but I've always been interested in the idea of a sanctuary or a sacred space, and I thought, what if I created my own? And I've been working with the idea of trees for many, many years. My work always has something to do with the environment and nature, and I sort of thought of this idea of like a sacred grove of trees sitting in this very urban city lot in the middle of downtown Denver, where there may have been trees at one time. It was obviously Native American land at one time. So maybe this is what sustainability is. Maybe this is sort of honoring the past of this landscape. And I never really know where or how these ideas come to me. But I thought of maybe giving each tree its own painting, and creating this star shape. It's kind of like a sacred grove of trees. My ancestors are Danish, and they used to worship trees, and they had sacred groves before the Christians came around and turned it into crosses and altars and things like that. So I just thought of this structure. I don't know, and then I wanted it to be somewhat sustainable. And someone offered me these plastic panels. I did the research today. I found out they're called polygal. It's a brand name for this sort of insulating plastic material, and so I was able to get those for free. I had to cut them down, and I really wanted to honor my practice of painting. So I proposed this structure, and she said, "Great, go for it." Okay, now I have to make. And I don't know how much sleep I lost over that. It was really hard because I'm not a sculptor, but I thought it would be really cool to present these two-dimensional forms as a three-dimensional structure that you go inside and sort of be surrounded by these tree shapes, but also sort of look at it from outside as like an object. So it was both kind of like a place to go, to be safe, to be inside, but also kind of a fortress to kind of protect this natural environment. And I wanted there to be spikes. I don't know where I came up with that, but that sort of came from the fortress. Maybe that was sort of both dangerous, sort of protective, but also protecting. And so originally you were supposed to walk into this space. It was probably about 20 feet across. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, and 3 months downtown in this space where it was probably the rainiest summer we've ever had. It was like a storm every other day, and it was constantly sort of blowing over to the point where I had to secure the door and keep it from being, that was like a weak link in the structure. So it actually, you could still crawl underneath. I strung it with solar lights so that during the day they would absorb energy, and then at night it would sort of glow. If you want to see pictures, it's on my website under Stanza. And the title, you were asking about titles. I like everybody else here, I spent time in Italy, so I know Italian, and I like titles that are a little bit mysterious, so I always think of Italian words thinking, oh, people know what that means. They don't necessarily. Mm-hmm. But it means big room in Italian. But it's also the word for poetry, sort of kind of a collection of phrases. And so it kind of made sense that these trees all sort of came together to form this form. And then I actually really liked the Z in stanza because it reminded me of the shape of it. My favorite titles are the ones that have lots of little sort of nuances to them, and they give the viewer it's not like a super highway into the work. It's like a path. You have to kind of do a little bit of work to think about why it has that title.
So it means big room?
Yeah, stanza.
Okay, I have no idea.
I'm sure Melissa and Jono do that. But it's a big, it's like, yeah.
Well, that actually leads into my next question. So this is a departure, but I've seen like your other works, and it's very connected to your artwork because of the environmental shapes. But, as far as the size of it, you're not, I've seen in your works, you have many works that are very large.
I love working big.
Yeah.
That's why it's sort of a dream of mine to create my own, my own structure.
I wanted to ask all of you, how does scale play into your work? Because you, Trine, specifically, I saw your work monumental, and those were small panels, but they worked together. Yeah. But then, your glacier project was very large on the fabric. So how does scale play into what you create, how you create, and how do you make those decisions?
Do you want me to start?
However, okay.
Well, I love working large. Absolutely love working large. I love the idea of sort of encompassing environment, like a painting you could feel like you could walk into. Early in my career, I worked for Betty Parsons' gallery, Betty Parsons herself, and then the gallery. And she showed all these abstract expressionists that had like monumental sized paintings. And the idea was that you'd hang them sort of belly height, and you could sort of be, if you're standing close to it, it would be sort of take up your peripheral vision, and you would be sort of absorbed into it. And I still love that sort of romantic idea of a painting being kind of like something that creates a mood or a feeling or a sensation. It's not practical to work big all the time. I have a whole storage space full of large paintings. They're hard to move. But I love doing big commissions. The one that you mentioned at the convention center, it's like 65 feet wide, 24 feet tall. Commissions are great because someone's paying you to work large, and it's already sold. So basically, very practical. But I also like the idea of the series and the multiples making up a whole. So I did a series of paintings called 100 Paintings for 100 Years. I did 100 paintings. They were only 24 inches high, but since there were 100 of them, they filled like a whole 5,000 square foot gallery. And that's what the monumental piece that you mentioned, it was very, very small paintings. But then together it was like, 12 feet across and 6 or 7 feet high. So I kind of like things that are like the size of your face, and then things that are like the size of your body. It's those middle sofa-sized paintings I'm not as fond of, but those are probably the most practical sizes in terms of sales. But I like sort of something being the size of your face and your head. So scale, I guess. When I'm given a lot of space, I like to fill it up. So that's how the glacier project got so big. The glaciers themselves are huge, and walking to them, that was a project I did where I depicted all 14 remaining glaciers in Colorado, and I wanted to somehow express this idea that these are like really precious objects or natural objects that may not be around forever, and so they had to be somewhat big. But I did them on fabric, so they're also rather delicate and fragile.
You guys have? I'm kind of similar to Trine, where either I work really big or really small. I mean, I guess there's a couple in the other room that are a little bit different, but that just happened to me. It was just because I was thinking of the piece as the larger dolmen rather than the individual pieces. But mine is based off of just like my education. I started as a painter, and I come from a small town in Iowa, and so there wasn't really many art classes I could actually take. So I ended up getting into the theater, and I pretty much painted 30-foot long, 10-foot high scrims throughout my education, and started that way, always thinking about the large environment and then these figures with a dialogue and props on a stage. And I feel like that has always been the way that I sort of think creatively with my own continuing work. Short answer for you.
I remember some of your earlier works that I saw when I was younger, having this sense of like transparent layers or something.
The layering is important to me. That's just that staged space kind of.
Yeah, that's really cool. Scale for me, I really like working big too. I think there's just something about that painters probably resonate with, the immersive quality of you can sort of imagine you're being in the space, and it's like going to the movies, like how awesome is that? It's sensual experience. And then Trine, I like that idea of like as big as your face or as big as your body. Right? It's these kind of these reference points of how we perceive, how we take in things, right? That's really cool. This scale was a little bit of an awkward thing for me to get into, because it is more, this is like a very saleable scale, I would think. And I've been working with this size for the last few years, the size behind me. This kind of scale is more of like an imagined space, or to me, the way that I think about it is like a conceptualized space or a thought space. And things don't have to be they don't have to be life size. They're it's like a window into a little world, and you can imagine playing with them or whatever. But when the objects are life size, there's just something that's like you don't have to translate it as much, I think, too. I remember when I was younger and I did a life size drawing, and it just opened things up for me. It was just easier. It's like sculpting. You just make the thing. You don't have to translate it. So, so that's a really nice relationship to have with the image that you're making. But then I also find it can be a fun challenge or fun to think about smaller paintings that are almost jewel-like or precious objects and crafting this little thing. But I think of those more as objects. I don't know if I've made anything like that. Thought about making things like that. Yeah.
Cool. So going back to the concept of risky business and having it be, as artists create, there's this choice to either, sit with your whole creativity or bring in the element of, well, I want this to sell, or I have a plan, or I need gallery representation. So as far as, all of your art careers, did you have a plan? As far as this is my mission, this is my plan, I'm gonna get, I'm gonna work on this gallery, I'm gonna set this goal, or how do you
That's a good question. Anybody want to take that before?
I'll go for
Y'all
it.
are more veterans.
I'll go for it. I had no plan. When I was like everybody, when you first start to realize you like making art better than you like doing anything else, maybe, you could do something with it. And I didn't even know that artist was like a career choice. I thought you had to make illustrations or something like that. So I ended up in art school just because that seemed like I should, if I'm going to do something with art, I should go full force, do the thing. And then I got to art school and it's that just, everything I thought I knew about art was completely wrong or, misguided. And I'm very grateful I went to art school because then I sort of started realizing there were all these other things you could do with art, like actually make art. But I never thought you could actually make a living at it. I was kind of aware of Picasso and Warhol and Rauschenberg, but as time went on, I realized, there's this place called New York, you could go there and see what it's like. And I got a job in a gallery, as I mentioned, and that's when I sort of started to see artists up close and living artists that were making art and they were selling it, hopefully, and then I realized that's really what I wanted to be too. I wanted to be that kind of, and it wasn't easy. New York was really tough. It was early 80s. I think that's when the Guerrilla Girls were starting out, and everything they said was true. There was very few women in major galleries or museum shows, but I didn't even think about that as something to stop me or to consider. I just kept making art and just kept trying to show it as much as possible. I don't think I had a grand plan because then after living in New York for a few years, I moved here. And that was probably the worst thing I could do because I was just starting to show my work. I was just starting to sell it. And then I came here and it was it's mid-80s in Colorado. It was pretty depressing. But, I just always wanted to make art. So I thought, well, this is great. There's no distractions here at all. And then I was lucky enough to find a good gallery and they kept asking me for work and it just one thing led to another, but I never had a plan. I still don't. I have this theory where you say, how people say, oh, you gotta learn how to say no to everything. I'm like, no, I just say yes. And then hopefully.
I'll to call you.
Hopefully, it's I don't know if karma is the right word, but I've had so many experience, just very, very much providence sort of worked out, where someone saw my show 5 years ago, and then they told someone else about it, and then all of a sudden they're considering me for some, major hotel commission or something. It's just, it's hard work, and it's luck, and it's just maybe, happening to be in the right place at the right time. But I don't know. Do you guys have plans?
Your plan is to eat.
Yeah.
Roof over your head, basically.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't from a rich family that, I had to make it happen or it was just going to fall apart. And I didn't want to get stuck in small town Iowa for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So I was going to make it happen. So I don't know, I trained and thought I was going to be a graphic designer in undergrad. So I got the skills and then I applied for jobs, I was in tears, didn't get anything, and then I started working on artist residencies, and so I landed my first artist residency in San Francisco at the Collage Art Institute, and moved to San Francisco out of nowhere. I had never traveled or done anything else before really much in my life. I had studied abroad, but other than that. So I picked up, moved to San Francisco, and applied for graphic design jobs, and interviewed, and failed. And then worked in a pet store, did my artist residency, and lithography, and applied for grad school. And then, I had tried out graphic design, and I just couldn't sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. You try things out, and then it doesn't work. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a painter. And all this was like against my family. They didn't want me to. Everything I had to do completely self-sufficiently, which wasn't exactly easy, but I guess in the end it made me stronger and helped me to succeed with what I wanted to do, because when everyone else would give up, I wouldn't give up. So like getting my first job straight out of grad school, my experience here, I had just gotten my MFA, my terminal degree, and I was applying for jobs, nothing was showing up. I was like literally detasseling corn in the fields with teenagers in Iowa, waiting for these job possibilities to show up. And finally, I'm like in the fields and I get the phone call for an interview. Because I had kept applying, you have to, I was applying all the way through May, and other people had already given up, or they were like specific, I'll only teach in this place or whatever, and I wasn't going to be picky, I just needed to get something. And then it just worked out, and I was like, thank God. But it was always very stressful, my heart was always racing, and I was always in debt, credit card debt, and refusing to go back home to my parents, and I painted a mural in some dude's barn and lived in a farmhouse and until I could figure it out. And so that's what an artist does if they really want to make it happen, right?
Yeah. The side hustles, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like everything I do is a side hustle. It's a bunch of side hustles. Well, I'm still trying. I'm figuring it out big time. I have no idea. The whole thing is a big risky business. But I guess I just, I thought I'd become famous and get rich. That's not happening. So the whole thing is a risky. It's you just got to be really naive and also really just love making art. I guess that's part of it. But yeah, I have no answer for you as far as a career goal plan. What I'm learning now is, just don't give up, because every little thing builds, and then there's opportunities, but in between them, man, it's really hard. Yeah, and it's hard making it work.
That's the risk, but the show, it's scary, but you have to take those risks in order to figure it out, right?
I just feel like I can't swallow the other pill, I just can't do it, I just can't do it. I think about the graphic design. I was in a gallery, I won't say which one, but I was in a gallery a few days ago, and I'm I asked them, what's the work that sells in your gallery? And they show me these bear paintings. I'm like, bear paintings, man, I can't make them. Painting of a bear with bright prismatic colors. And that's awesome if that's what you're doing, but I can't do that. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to keep trying.
It's really interesting though, but because a lot of what the Firehouse does is we want to take that mystery out. Trine, you were talking about I didn't know when I got out, and I had the same experience of doing graphic design. I went into fashion design because I thought, well, what am I going to do? You do have to have those side hustles if you're going to keep going out to galleries or keep applying for calls and things like that. And so a lot of the education that we do is reaching out to younger and emerging artists and connecting them to professional artists that have all these gems of wisdom, but also kind of just that advice. You just have to keep going. You just have to keep doing it. And
I think that's it, really. Yeah. I make it sound like it's just sort of, it all just happened, but you do have to have a certain drive, and you have to really love what you're doing, because no one else is going to do that for you. You have to have that inner, just you must really love what you're doing in order to put up with so much to do it. I mean, things are so different now than when I started out too. I mean, just having all these online tools to be able to use and be able to share your work. We didn't have that. We had the slides. You had to mail them out, and make copies, and it was very expensive, and it was kind of unwieldy, and it was never very successful to do it that way. I did it, but I don't remember getting much out of it. But I think it takes imagination, not just in what you're making in your work, but also imagination, like how am I going to make this all work together? What are my side hustles? Am I going to be teaching? I did try teaching for a while. I did some artists in the elementary schools and the public schools. I did a lot of, when I was living in New York, I did a lot of side jobs. Some were art related, some were not, but I did lots and lots and lots of jobs.
I did the signs for the coffee house that I worked in
Yeah.
in New York. That was my artistic.
One of my favorite jobs wasn't art related, and what I liked about that was because at 5 o'clock you could go home and then you could paint. And I often tell artists when they're asking me what advice would you get, I say, well, it's nice to have a job in the art world, but then you're like living it all the time. And I worked for a production company. They would like scout locations for commercials, and I answered the phone. And I greeted people that came in the door, and they thought I was brilliant. I was so nice, just and all I had to do was show up every day and do those two things, and then and then go home, and they gave me money for that. So I was, but I worked in galleries, and I worked for art consultants, and I worked for printmakers for a while. I mean, I did like every side art job in New York imaginable. And that's why it was so weird when I moved here, because there was nowhere to go to make money. I didn't have anything. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll just try being an artist. So luckily that worked out okay.
And so the last questions I have are about building community through the arts. And so you, Trine, you've been in New York and you've been in San Francisco. As far as like the Colorado arts community, obviously we're not LA or New York. How is that support system, and as far as that, and we'll lead into talking about the group that you're all in, Art House. But do you want to start?
Okay. Well, in New York, I went to every opening I could. I worked in an art gallery, so it was easy. I got invitations to things. I heard about openings, and I had a girlfriend that I had met in Rome, and somehow I ran into her on the street in the village, and we're like, oh, we should go to openings together. And we were just like just two crazy girls that would just go to openings, and we'd like eat all the food and drink the wine, and and then we'd meet people. And it was kind of like early on, that was networking. We didn't know it, but that was how we met people and got all these other jobs. And I was working in a gallery. She was working for a major printmaker. I mean, they were doing like Julian Schnabel prints, Eric Fischl prints, Francesco. I mean, all these like the really hot artists in New York at the time. So between the two of us, we had a pretty wide network, and we went to a lot of stuff, and we got to know a lot of people, which was really fun. And then we started, hearing about group shows, and the only problem was that we were always out. We were working and out having fun. We didn't have as much time to make art. So I was like, well, I know these great people, but I have nothing to show them, So, but eventually, I stopped working full time. I kind of went to part time, and then I would, have time to paint. And so that was sort of a good education. Was like meeting people face to face and just having casual conversations about art or what are you up to right now. Has served me really well in my life. And so when I moved here and I started going to openings, that was kind of how I met people too. It was just, and still, I'm amazed how you'll just have like a casual conversation with someone, and then next thing you know, you're, planning a show together. So that's sort of that community. But I also worked really hard to try and give back too, so that like I said that the work I did for schools and being an artist in residence. I translated to my own kids' schools. When they started school, I realized they didn't have an art program in the schools, so I started one. I got all my artist friends to volunteer. I don't know, why they did it. It was so nice of them. Artists are the nicest people in the world. And we got this full-time art program going in this elementary school, so much that other schools would ask us how we did this, and then we started fundraising to help buy materials, and then eventually we were making so much money, we were like, well, wait a minute, we could pay a teacher. So that sort of translated finally into like a full-time teacher for the school. And I've done lots of things like that. I worked with the Denver Art Museum for a while. So it's always been nice to have some other sort of more altruistic thing going on, because that kind of keeps me engaged in the community and makes me, I guess, be less selfish. You know, not that I need to be less selfish, but it's nice to sort of, I don't know, painting is such a lonely pursuit. You know, you're by yourself in the studio all the time, and you can go to openings, but it's nice to work on things together with other people. And so with the art museum, we were always doing events and programs and things like that. It was always fun to kind of create something with other people. And that's how it feels now with the Art Nuts. Kind of as my time at the art museum, which was 13 years, was winding down, I found out about the Art Nuts that we're all in. And that's been kind of my main thing, you know, my main community engagement thing for the last 7 years or so.
And what is the Art Nuts?
I'll do it because I'm the newest one. I don't know as much about it. The Art Nuts is a collective of artists. It's been around 25 years, something like that.
Yeah, we're working on our 30th next, but yeah, 25 this past summer.
Oh, okay. Started in and around CU Boulder, I think, and with some of the professors there. That's what I'm gathering. And the mission is to make socially conscious art in contentious areas around the globe, and to have exhibitions in these spots. And the founder, George, what's his last name again?
Rivera.
Right, of course. George Rivera thinks about it as a social sculpture. Mm-hmm. So, and is very inspired by Joseph Bowlby's and his ideas about social sculpture. So three exhibitions a year, and we all make work in response to George's call, his prompt, that has to do with what's going on in that particular area. So we just had an exhibition in Bethlehem, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. For example, and then there's another show coming up in Bogota, in Colombia, that has to do with the environmental struggles that are going on down there between mining companies and indigenous communities and that kind of thing. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, you did good. It's been going on a long time. I think it started out with George wanting to do an exchange with artists in Mexico, and it was about the AIDS epidemic. Mm-hmm. So, circumstances have changed. It got harder to bring the artists here. The work started out to be large. Now it's very small because ever since 9/11, it's been really hard to get anything, on an airplane or through customs. So the work has sort of shrunk in size, but it's no less powerful. It's always, there's varying degrees of political discourse going on in the work, and it's very open. It's not like an illustration of the idea. It's kind of like, how would you interpret this? Use something from your own life or what you see going on in the world, and make something in response to this. We had another show in Sarajevo. And I've been on several of the trips. I've been to Sarajevo twice, the DMZ in Korea. DMZ is the border between North and South. There's actually a 10-mile wide strip, and there's a museum in that strip. And we had a show. We were the first Americans to show in that museum. And it was a trip. That was definitely a trip. That was so interesting. I like going because you get to experience firsthand what George is talking about, this social sculpture. There's very little formally set up. We'll do talks, we'll have an opening, there'll be a reception, we'll meet with some of the artists that will help hang the show or that are in the show. But it's these sort of informal conversations and discussions and anecdotes and stories. And I'd say probably the places where I got most of that was in Sarajevo, because we met a lot of the people. The siege of Sarajevo was from 92 to 96. And so many of the people there obviously remember it, but they were all at different ages. And depending on their age, you would get a different story. And so there's a man there, he's almost 80 years old, he has one experience. And then there's people that were like 5 years old when there were snipers trying to kill them as they went to school. And hearing their stories in person is so powerful. And it just, I mean, I get goosebumps still now thinking about it, because they're living this history that we've only read about in the newspaper, if we even bothered to read that story about something happening so far away in the world. And I'd say the other place was Uganda. I went to Uganda in 2019, and hearing, and there happened to be a women's conference there at the same time, so I met mostly with women, and just hearing their stories about how they were, they lost their whole family in Rwanda, or they were married off to an older man when they were, a young girl, or child soldiers. I mean, their stories are so hard to hear, but then when you hear them, you realize this is something you don't get unless you actually are talking to people from these places. So.
Well, I have so many questions about that. We're almost at the end, and I want to open it up for others.
I might be talking too much.
No. I think that this is wonderful, and I did actually have like a whole other group of questions about the intentional messaging, and like when artists create, and what is that, like artists have this responsibility, because we kind of have art on the walls and people come see it, and we can share messages that may be sometimes challenging to just read on a page or something like that. And what is the responsibility of artists that have this agency to share this message? So we'll have to do that at another time, because I wanted to open it up to questions, because we're like kind of at the end of our time. Does anyone have questions about the work, whether it's the main or south gallery?
I have a question. I think it's a really obvious one for Jono. What would you take out of your house in the same situation?
Yeah, I was asked that a couple of times. It's a good question. Yeah, I have, it's tricky. There's like so many things. I've got, like probably you two, like bunch of paintings and rolls of paintings and all this work and all. But there's just one item that just always comes back to my mind, which is my mom gave me when I kind of left home when I was in my late teens. She gave me a little arrowhead that she found when she was a little girl, and I keep that in my little box of treasures. And I think I would grab that, even though I never look at it. It was just something about that thing. I'm like, yeah, I want to keep that. Yeah.
Did anyone here bring an item for the? Mine is in the painting. I love.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
The lens is in here.
Just so it's not a mystery anyway, it's that black box right there, which is very mysterious. People actually were like, "What is that?" And somebody was saying, "Is it an Alexa?" Like,
play a song.
Because she was saying this painting is all about sound, and it's actually it's my charging box for my hearing aids. So I would not be able to hear if I left my house and I didn't have it. So, and I thought it was so great because it was like this mysterious thing, and nobody really knew what it was. And then I told Jono what it was, and then it ended up in the sound when I was like,
Yeah, I love that kind of thing. Like it's an inside joke,
Yeah.
And I like having inscrutable things, or that people don't know what they are. So having that little puzzle or the mystery in the work is fun. Yeah.
Even my kids didn't know what it was. It's like, are you kidding me? Anyway, any other?
Can you talk? Oh, go ahead. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to hang the fabric over?
Yeah, sure. So again, it's a Buddhist thing. Yeah, these are a scarf is called kata, K-A-T-A, and it's a ceremony that I grew up with when I was a little kid, when there was like a lama or a rinpoche that would come to town, and you would have the opportunity to greet them as they were like getting out of their car and going to their residence or whatever. And so people would line up and they would have the scarves, the katas, and you would offer that to the teacher, and then they would put it back over your shoulders as a blessing. So I've kept a kata over the shrine where I meditate ever since. Well, I've been using the kata over there for a number of years. I don't remember how long. And so yeah, these are altars, right? So that's how I'm contextualizing the objects as sacred. And so having the katas hanging over the paintings just emphasizes that and strengthens that. And this is actually the kata that I hang on my shrine.
That's what I was going to ask, like which was
That's the one.
yours and which was like appropriated. Or...
Yeah.
So my question was just kind of occurred to me as I was listening to your responses that you talk a lot about balance, your practice, approach to attachment and non-attachment, and all of these things. That word balance kept coming up again and again, and I'm just struck by a magnificent visual balance in each of these, like from a central axis. So even looking at that black box.
Yeah.
There's the black strap of the other guitar, and so whether it's just light or objects or negative space versus positive space, there's just this incredible sense of asymmetrical balance. And I was wondering if you were aware of a connection, if that was intentional.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it actually reminds me of something that Diane asked me when I was being interviewed for this whole project. She said, well, how are you going to make them look like altars and not just still lifes? And I said, probably something to do with symmetry. So I worked with that, and I thought about that being something that works with the theme, symmetry. You'll see that in shrines of all kinds of traditions. But then painting and composing is all about that fine balance of things. And I think that's something I'm highly attuned to and that I pay really close attention to. It's something that you feel in your body and you feel emotionally, psychologically, like everything kind of senses when something is off kilter or when it falls right into place. So that's something I pay attention to probably more so than any other thing, actually. It's a big, big part of it.
Yeah, so we've got yellow bird just left of center, balancing the picture just right of center.
Right. Yeah. And some things are just chance, you just give it a try and see if it works. And that's what happened with the little bird. I just put it in there and I thought, oh yeah, right, because the portrait of the dog, and I need to balance that as drawing too much attention. So just went with it. Yeah, thanks.
And I asked Jono, the bird was not brought in.
I know. It's like
Yeah. Stay there.
yeah, it keeps tipping over.
Yeah.
I had a question because one of the things I love about your work is that sort of that progression, and I even told my students the other day that you were like, if I find myself sort of dancing around this one area, like it's too precious, I just paint over it. And I was like, yes. Like, I was so excited. I was like, just erase it, just paint over it. And then, so I loved too, during your artist talk, seeing photographs of different iterations of this piece as it changed and changed and changed. Yeah. And I was wondering if you took any photos of these.
I do have. I didn't do it so much as I have in the past because I was moving sort of faster with these. But yeah, I have photographs of the different iterations and versions of them. Yeah, this one's changed quite a bit. The sculpture, the one with the teal color there, it used to be all red in the back. Mm-hmm. And you can see a little bit in there.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
I took a chance on the cloth that the little bell above John's head right there. That was about as white as these katas are. And I was trying to figure it out. How is it going to look with the chili, reflecting the light from the chili lights? And so I painted that, a couple of times trying to figure that out.
But probably also the deadline keeps you from scrapping an entire section.
Actually, it made me just a little bit more cutthroat about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
that's
like,
interesting.
if it's not working, just get rid of it and
Very
move
cool.
forward.
Yeah.
Like that was one of the real blessings of the deadline.
You didn't have the luxury of sort
of
wishy-washy.
second guessing
Yeah.
myself. It doesn't feel right, get rid of it.
Interesting.
Just go.
Good.
And also having an iPad to try out things and being fearless with that helped a lot with the beast over there and this one too, actually, as I was getting close to the end. Yeah, and the one with the candle right in the middle that I think I'm calling the ancestors. That one over there with the candle in the middle. I use the iPad a lot.
That's the ones who light. That's what the title is.
Oh, the ones. Oh, so it's very close, anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I was just wondering what the meaning was because when
Yeah,
I
what the
typed
meaning
it
was,
into the
right.
guide, I was like,
Yeah, okay, the ones who like. Yeah, so it's kind of similar to the ancestors. Yeah, all right, good.
I have a question about the meat painting. What was that one called again?
Your
Dead Meat. So before, I was immediately drawn to that one, and before you said you were from Iowa, I was going to ask something about, like, if your personal history, because you talk about histories a lot, and the telephone, through history and cliches, and, like, the idea of ruin. So I was wondering, before you said that, if your personal history is kind of interwoven with those same ideas. And then I kind of heard your story about, like, growing up and then you were in the cornfield and all that, but I was wondering if it's, like, intentional.
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest. I mean, like, I don't know. I'm not a vegetarian, but that painting actually in particular was I was approached by another Landish publication recently, and they titled the issue "We Are All Meat," which I really loved because it was all about this idea of flesh and the body and our consumption too. And I like when people write about my work that aren't, that come with things that I didn't really think about at the time, but that are really relevant and our use of energy and what it does to be consumers of meat, I guess. But I really love the shocking nature of that piece, and I didn't know that Jono was going to hang it the way he did. So I was actually I love that. I was like, I love that it's like hanging over your head because it is something that's hanging over our heads right now, like in culture, and something that we're thinking about like our use of energy and how we're wasting things and environmental change, and our consumption of meat is a big part of that, right?
So along with that, in that same painting, and the orientation of it being kind of higher up, there's that part in the upper right with like the outstretched, almost like crucifixion or something like that just screamed to me Francis Bacon.
Yeah.
And I was curious, like...
it's interesting because the issue features Francis Bacon in it too, the magazine I was talking about. But I was really, when I chose the certain aspects of the meat that I was selecting, it was more like the relationship with the body and how it looks like a human form. And I was like just playing with the grossness of it, honestly. Just having a little bit of fun at the same time, but also being serious, right?
Sounds like something Francis Bacon would do. Thinking about a big piece of meat as a human body and having fun with that.
Cool. Do we have any other questions? Well, the time after the artist talk is usually just reserved to walk the space. And if you guys walk the space and have any other questions, the artists are here just to answer questions. But I wanted to say thank you so much for coming. We are trying to have these artist talks every month, and so stay tuned for next month. And, we'll have a new group of artists, and I wanted to personally thank Jono and Melissa and Trine for coming and giving us time on your weekend. And I know you guys are really busy and have all sorts of projects in line, and I know that Melissa, you have a show at K Contemporary right now. So definitely, if you have a chance, head down to Denver and see that as well. So thank you, everyone, for coming.